Hi, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to have a webinar that focuses on ERIC's new API that we just released last night, and it provides an easy way to query the ERIC repository. But before we begin, I want to go over a few quick housekeeping items. First, we're going to mute everyone so we don't get feedback from your phones. If you have a question at any time, please enter it into the chat box, and we'll answer it during our Q&A session at the end of the webinar. We will be posting this presentation on YouTube in a few weeks and making it accessible from the ERIC multimedia page on our website. We will send everyone who registered an email to let you know when the video is available, and then you can share the link with others. So today, two of us are going to be speaking with you. I'm Erin Pollard, the Project Officer for ERIC in the U.S. Department of Education. I oversee the program from the government's perspective and set policies for the program. Doug Schnelzer is the Technology Director with AEM Corporation, the contractor supporting ERIC for the U.S. Department of Education. He has been developing the software and advising clients on the use of open source and open standards development for over 20 years. So here's what we're going to cover today. First, an overview of ERIC's tools for downloading our underlying metadata and why we enhance the user access by implementing the API. Then we're going to give a short definition of a REST API and a brief introduction to the ERIC API and the API documentation. Then we're going to go online for some quick demos using common use case scenarios. And lastly, you'll have a chance to ask some questions in our Q&A session. So let's start with an overview of ERIC and its commitment to making our metadata freely available. The ERIC website and extensive collection of education research are sponsored by the Institute of Education Sciences. ERIC has been acquiring and indexing education resources for more than 50 years, and today we host a collection of more than 1.7 million records. We provide a variety of ways for our over 12 million annual users to gain access to ERIC's data. Our most widely used tool is ERIC Search. ERIC has an intuitive search engine that returns records from the collection based on relevance. The search engine scans the title, abstract, descriptors, and other fields in ERIC records to find matches to search terms. We provide filters to help users further narrow their results. ERIC shares all of its metadata in downloadable files that are available on the ERIC website. These files enable search engines, academic databases, and others to power their search engines with ERIC data. This helps users find good research wherever they're searching. For users that want to capture search results for reference or citation formatting, we provide the Save and Export features on the search results page. Users have the option to save and email search results or export citations to a file for upload to a citation management software. Finally, ERIC has implemented a new API to make access of ERIC data even more timely, flexible, and accessible. Our help desk has received multiple requests for this feature from developers, researchers, and others who use APIs for research and data access, and we're really excited to bring this to you today. So first, we're going to briefly describe what a REST API is, and then introduce the ERIC API to get a picture of how it works and how it can benefit you.
So starting with what a REST API is, let's first start with what an API is. It stands for Application Programming Interface. And an API simply is a way for one software program to talk to another software program. So within the category of APIs, a web API is an API that allows one software program to communicate with another software program over the internet. And then within web APIs, the popular type of web API is a REST API. And so a REST API is a unique web API in that it uses the same communication protocols to communicate between software that your web browser uses when you are talking to a website and browsing pages on a website. REST won the battle of the APIs just by the fact that it's the easiest way to implement two software systems talking to each other over the internet, and because of that, it's become the most popular. So just as websites are for people and allow people to communicate with another website, an API, a REST API, allows one software system using the same technology to talk to another software system. There are many thousands of REST APIs out there, including things like the Associated Press, NASA, PayPal, Spotify, Facebook, Google, and Apple.
So who do we think will use this feature? First, we think that researchers and students conducting semantic searches and systematic reviews will find this to be a really valuable tool to help speed up their searching. We also think librarians may integrate ERIC into their online catalog so that they can immediately expand the number of records that they can make available. We think third-party providers of ERIC data, such as academic subscription-based databases, might find this to be valuable. We think that those who want to share abstracts and metadata of articles may use the fact that our metadata is in the public domain to integrate our API. And then we here at IES use the API to help coordinate data between ERIC and some of our other internal systems. So I want to begin by giving a few examples of how we have used this API at IES, and then I'm going to turn it over to Doug to talk through some ways that we think you may use this. We want to share our internal ways first, just to kind of generate some ideas of some things that you may not think that you can do with ERIC data. So IES, one of our key functions is awarding grants to fund research. And part of our requirements of grants after 2011 is that publications from our peer-reviewed research must be made freely available in ERIC as part of the IES public access policy. And you can learn more about that policy on our multimedia page that is linked to in the footer of the ERIC website right next to the API. So what we are doing is we're using the API and we're integrating it with our internal tracking system for our grants to be able to monitor questions like, are the articles that our grantees writing being made available in ERIC through the public access policy? And here, what you can see is highlighted in the green, we're picking on a grant by Russell Gerstein, who is someone that we work with closely in ERIC. And you can see that these are the publications from the grant. And this is on the IES website, but those links will then take you to ERIC. So we have the internal purpose of saying, are the articles in ERIC, as well as the external that we're making available to you, of here's a link to the publication so you can find it. Second, what we are going to do is we have integrated ERIC in the What Works Clearinghouse internal online study review tool. So the WWC reviews causal education studies to determine if they are done in a rigorous enough way to support the claims they're making. And because ERIC's metadata is in the public domain, the WWC can use ERIC's abstracts as the source terms to power its search. So what we've done is essentially merged our systems. So if a reviewer for the WWC wants to conduct a new review, they can search the WWC's Online Study Review Tool, or SRG, to see if the WWC has already reviewed that study. And so what you can see here is in that third row, there's a study ID. The WWC has already reviewed that study. Then next to it, you can see that it is also in ERIC. So if we hadn't reviewed a study, then by searching for it in our SRG tool, you can see the blue ED numbers, those are ERIC numbers, and we can, when we're adding the study to the SRG database, we're automatically pulling the metadata to be able to start the review. So then what you can do if we look on the next slide is that reviewers will be able to click add, the add button from that search result, and it will automatically populate. This saves reviewers time because all of these fields are automatically pulled in from ERIC. It also improves accuracy because people are human and they make mistakes when they're manually typing. And most importantly for you is that this is a more efficient process, because if the WWC is reviewing a study that is not in ERIC, the WWC will alert the ERIC team automatically that there's a key education study not in ERIC. And the ERIC team can work to get that study into ERIC so we can truly be comprehensive in indexing all relevant education research. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Doug to talk about other ways that we think you can use the API.
Thanks, Erin. The API was created to allow a diverse group of users to access ERIC data in many different needs. The API enables you to directly integrate your systems with ERIC resources. Why might you want to do that? The answers are actually quite varied. The ERIC API allows you to quickly query ERIC metadata and support research. Much like the ERIC web application, the API provides the ability to search the ERIC database, but unlike the search feature, it also allows you to automate the downloading of ERIC metadata, say for a particular research topic or publisher. For example, you might want to locate all the records on a specific topic, like bullying prevention, or obtain historical data on when publications about a given topic were being written. you can seamlessly integrate rich ERIC search capabilities into your existing web or mobile applications. For example, a university might want to include the API on their library resources webpage so students can run searches of ERIC directly from that page. The API can also be used to track the ERIC repository for a given topic, author, publisher, or peer review status. The API can download ERIC metadata for newly added records that meet your search criteria. This is a big improvement over the current downloaded files, which are not updated as frequently. The API does not provide a means to directly download full text documents, but you could easily present the ERIC page for any given record, which has a link to downloaded documents if they are available. So to get started in digging into the API, we want to take a look at the ERIC API documentation. And I'm going to switch over to that live page right now. So this is the ERIC API documentation, and we put this together simply to help you easily see what the ERIC API can do for you, to be able to understand how to use it, to really streamline the process of being able to evaluate what it would take to incorporate the ERIC API into your system, to use it for research, those types of things, and then to make it quick to get started actually using it. So the beginning of the documentation has an overview of the API, and provides here the initial 5 parameters that you use to query the API, and we're going to go into those more detail in just a minute. Those are search, format, start, rows, and fields. And we're going to go over those, as I said, again in just a minute. And then we're providing here in this bottom half some helpful information to getting started with ERIC. So if you're new to ERIC, or if you're looking for some of the best ways to query ERIC, how other people are using the tool, these are some good resources that are available to you. Scrolling down, we're going to look and get the technical details of the ERIC API. So let's walk through each of those parameters again here. So the search parameter is where you're going to actually put in your search criteria. And so you can search on many different fields that are available. If you just put in a search by itself, then you'll be doing a global search, which is going to search title, author, subject, source, and the description fields. Or if you want to search a particular attribute within the ERIC metadata, then you're going to put that attribute with a colon and then the criteria. So in this case here I've highlighted, we're searching for only things where peer-reviewed is true. The next attribute allows you the format, and it allows you to specify what format you want the data returned in. So the default is XML. That's what it's going to return to you if you don't provide anything for this particular attribute. But you can also specify that you would like the results as JSON or CSV. By default, ERIC is going to return 20 records at a time. So if there's more than 20 records and you don't want just the first 20 records, then you can specify this start parameter and indicate where you want the next set of records to begin with. So if you wanted records 21 through 40, you would set this start parameter to 21. And as I mentioned, ERIC by default is going to return 20 records at a time. You can increase that up to 200 if you want to by setting the rows parameter. And if there's a lot of results that you're trying to return back, increasing that rows parameter to 200 will make the API faster for you to download an entire record set. And finally, the fields attribute allows you to specify which fields you want to have returned in the data set. So by default, there are these frequently used fields here, starting with author and going down to subject, going down to title. And these frequently used fields will be returned by default if you don't specify anything in the frequently used fields property. We've actually provided a table here because in many cases, the field attribute name and the same name used on the ERIC website or in the download file are different. So here you can see the API attribute of ID would be the same as the ERIC number on the website, which is equal to this in the downloaded file. So that can help you if you're used to getting data a different way. There's many other fields that are available to you. If you request those, though, you need to actually specify a comma-separated list of those attributes in the field's property. And if you specify one attribute, then you'll no longer get all the frequently used attributes at the same time. You need to list those frequently used attributes as well. And so that's the documentation. It provides a lot of helpful information to get started, but we're going to go one step further. And before you leave the documentation, actually trying the documentation out is a great way to really understand how the API is working and for you to be able to understand what to expect that you're going to get back. So let's actually do some searches right here. And this is connected to the live API. And so let's start with just a simple global search, as I described before, for autism. I'm trying to scroll slowly here so that the webinar keeps up. And then select the execute button. And if we scroll down a little bit more, you can see that we were returned 15,854 records. Again, by default, we're going to be getting the first 20 records back, and you can see some of the metadata about the first record that's being returned. So I'm going to scroll quickly back up. So your screen's going to jump a little bit, but I'm just coming back up to where that search field was. And so now let's say instead of searching all of those ERIC global fields that I described before, which include title, author, subject, source, and the description fields, now we're only going to search the subject field. And so we do that again just by prepending that particular field with a colon and then the attribute. And I'm going to jump down to the bottom again of the documentation where that execute button is and click execute. And now we're down to 14,158 records returned. So, close to the 15,000 we had before, but you can see that adding the subject reduced that overall count. So have a more complex search now. So again, jumping back up to that search field, and I'm going to include an and let's also search for teaching methods. And so that's going to find records where the subject has both autism and teaching methods. You can see since I have two words in that subject, I'm using quotes for that teaching methods criteria. And if we select execute, now we're down to 1,261 records. So that filtered our result sets down quite a bit. And if we come down and look at subject, we can see indeed this one does have teaching methods and autism, as will all the other subsequent records in this result set. The next records just keep going down to get those. So let's take that one step further and show how we can continue to refine our search. So I'm going to come back up to subject and do and. We're going to do peer review. So now we're going to look for the same set, but we're going to filter it by examples that are actually peer-reviewed. And again, if we hit execute, scroll up here to the top, and we're down to 1,008 records that were actually peer-reviewed as well. One more quick example that I want to provide just to make it really obvious to everyone listening. If we replace our search criteria with museum, education, so we're searching by the words museum, education, by both words, and we do that search, and we come down here and we hit execute, we're going to see that that returned 1,197,469 results, which is probably the entire ERIC database. It's probably, at least most of it. And that's because it's searching for results where we have either museum or education anywhere in title, author, subject, source, or the description field. So in most cases, what you probably wanted there is to restrict it to where we had museum and education. And so we need to have that all caps and in between those words to be able to have a search where those two words are both exist in the fields that I just mentioned. And if we hit search again, now we're down to 2,933. So you can see the importance of using that and keyword. So So hopefully you can see the documentation is a way to get all the details that you need to use the API, but also help you start to get familiar with it. That can be great when you're trying to get a sense of estimating what it's going to take to integrate the ERIC API or to use it for research that you may be doing. Or if you know you need to do that, just getting started before you dive into your own code. Okay, so let's talk about some specific examples now of where we might use ERIC, the ERIC API. Okay. So the first example that we have listed here is the idea of a university either integrating into their own website or to LibGuides, the ERIC API. And LibGuides is a tool that's used by thousands of universities to bring together different types of data in a curated way for university, for students and faculty. And so you could configure your LibGuide to connect to the ERIC API and to pull ERIC metadata directly into that repository, which would be helpful. If you had a custom library website, you could do the same thing with a custom website where that website would be calling the API and could display search results within that website. And not having to go to another step to actually go to the ERIC website helps speed up the process of research, and in some cases may cause faculty and students to take advantage of that research, whereas if they have to go to the extra click, they may not actually do that. So it saves them some time and energy. And in that way, we're actually hopefully making ERIC data a little more valuable to everybody by making it more accessible. So what I'd like to do now is to actually walk through and go through a working example of actually using the ERIC API. And to do that, I'm going to switch over to a Jupyter Notebook. And so Jupyter Notebooks is just a tool being used extensively now in probably majority of universities and many, many corporations for doing data exploration and data science type work. So it's a nice tool, and that it allows you to have some narrative description of what you're doing along with your code in the same document. And in this particular Jupyter Notebook, I'm using Python as a programming language. I could have easily used JavaScript, C#, Java, or any other popular language that can make HTTP calls. And so we're going to walk through here, and we're going to look at 3 different examples of actually using the ERIC API, and hopefully this can give you a better feeling of what it would be like if you were to actually implement it. So the first part of what I'm going to do in this Jupyter Notebook is I'm importing just some Python libraries. And as you can see here, I'm providing, again, an overview of that same documentation as a benefit of the Jupyter Notebook. And I'm going to start by creating a function here called getEricRecords. And this is a very simple utility function that's actually going to make the ERIC API call. So there's the URL where the API is, and I can parameterize it using the various search parameters that are available to me. And it just makes it easier so I don't have to type that over and over again when I'm doing a search. In some cases, I only wanted to get back the number of records found. And so this function uses the function above it. This function called getRecordCount uses getEricRecords, which we just created, and it will just extract just the number of records found, and that can be kind of helpful. And then this is a function, again, building on it. This function, getAllEricRecords, is going to iterate over all the different records available for a particular search and bring them all back and put them in what we call a data frame, which is like a spreadsheet for managing the data. And so there's an example, this while loop here is an example of iterating over that. Similar concepts available in any other programming language. And so with that bit of homework done, I now have the ability to easily query the ERIC API. And so I'm going to start with a search here that's close to what we did in the documentation. I'm looking for autism and teaching methods. In my search where the subject has autism and teaching methods. And in this case, I'm restricting it also to records that were published in 2019. And so when I run that, it comes back and I can see that I'm getting 64 records returned here. And it took 1.3 seconds to return this. And then the Pandas as a Python library has a nice display of that. And so we're looking at the data here, those 64 records in an Excel-like format, so nice. Continuing along with exploring this data set that we have, There is a function here called info that I can implement on those result sets. And this is giving me some information about the data I just returned. So in this case, it's showing me, again, this is going to be the frequently used fields because I didn't specify a set of fields that we were going to pull back, so I'm getting the frequently used ones. And it's showing me that for things like author and description, every returned record actually has some data available. But for the ISBN, for example, only 5 of the records have an ISBN, and 59 of the 64 records have an ISSN number associated. So helpful to be able to characterize and get a sense of the data that's coming back to me. Looking at just some more ways that I have to look at the data. Here, if I didn't want to look at all those frequently used fields, I wanted to pick out here just a subset of ID, title, author, publication date, and description, and present that. I could look at that, and this head 20 is just saying, give me the first 20 records that were returned. So again, just different ways to explore the data. What I want to do now is demonstrate what it would take not to get just the frequently used fields, but if I wanted to get all the ERIC fields back. And so these are all the fields that we looked at in the documentation before, put together in what's called an array. And so if I return that, there's 34 possible fields that we're going to ask for. And now when I do the same query here we had before of subject autism and subject teaching methods and publication date year is 2019, but in this case here I'm actually specifying that all fields, which is a parameter in my function that we defined above, and so it's going to pass in and say, hey, I'd like to get all the data back that's available. And so if I hit a return, we still get 64 records back. And I can look at the beginning of them, but now we can see even when I just do a quick preview of the data here, I can see that I'm getting things like E full text off, E year added, education level provided back in my data set. And the ... there in pandas, it's actually skipping over those. So it's showing me the first few and the remaining few. We could tailor that if we wanted to see specific ones. But again, using this info function that's available, now I can see too, here's all of the different attributes that are available. And again, you can see some attributes, I'm not getting anything at all, like identifier's law is not populated in these 64 records. There's no data for these particular 64 records that have the identifier's law attribute. Others like institution, we can see that 2 records have that. So again, that's just helpful for characterizing the data that's available. This next one just shows how easy it is to take that data. We've done a query, we've set it up the way we want it to, but we're more comfortable maybe working in Excel, or we want to pass it to someone else and that data that doesn't have the Jupyter Notebook running. So I just ran that records to Excel. And if I come over here, you know what? Let's delete those and just show that it actually did generate it. So we come over, and so records to Excel, it just created that document right there. And if we open that in Excel, and make it a little bit bigger, easier to read. Yep. And you can see it's just simply all that data in an Excel file. So you could take that and you could pass it along to someone else to do work with and store that. So that's helpful. All right, so let's move on to our second example. And in this one, we're going to look at some particular topics. We're going to look at when was the term hazing most researched according to ERIC metadata and published documents, and when a particular author was published as well. So first, I'm going to run that same search I have available. I'm going to call get all records, and it's going to bring back all the records for hazing, and I'm asking it to return to me all the different fields that are available. And so that took 3 seconds to run, and I got back 139 records. Again, if I wanted to characterize that data, I can use this .info method, and I can see what's populated. For example, the audience in this record, 26 of the 139 records have the audience data available for the audience. Okay. And then continuing to come down here, I've got a way in Pandas to graphically show when articles that have autism in them were actually, or sorry, not autism, I'm sorry, hazing, sorry about that, when hazing were published. And so you can see from the 1970s through the 1980s, we had like one record, but it looks like we had more records about hazing were being published in just before 2000 and kind of in 2010. And so, again, good example of what that looks like and being able to show us some pictures of what's in the data. So again, Russell Gersten is someone that's helped out a lot with IES and with the Whiteworks Clearinghouse practice guides. And so let's take a look at when he published articles that are uploaded in ERIC. And so I run that, and we can see that by year, we can see when articles, and for a couple decades there, several decades, he's been publishing up to 8 or 9 articles or periodicals in ERIC. All right. Let's take a look at our third and final example that we want to talk about. And so this is a scenario where maybe you want to keep track of what's new in ERIC on a particular topic, and how might we do that and use the ERIC API to support that. Some examples of people who might want to do that: researchers might want to be tracking when there's new research available for projects or topics that they're interested in. Professors, other experts wanting to stay abreast of research in their field could use this kind of a process that we're going to walk through. Third-party providers and librarians wanting to update their repositories or catalogs with new records could use this type of a system. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to do a search looking at the source, the WhatWorks Clearinghouse in mathematics, and we're going to do a search, and we're going to be tracking these records specifically that are have a source of WhatWorks Clearinghouse and a subject of mathematics. And so when we do that, we get 191 records that come back. And looking this head here is returning just the first few records that are available. What we're going to do now, though, is we're going to take these records that were just returned to us here. This records variable is created to get all the records. And now we're going to sort them, and which you don't really have to do. But we're going to save them to a CSV file on, in this case, on my laptop. If you wanted to do this with a more robust system, you could easily take the same data set and save it to a database, for example, and build a system that way. And so when I do that, I'm going to see that there's a new CSV file that was just written here. And if I open that, that'll open up in Excel, similar to the previous result that we just looked at. And just to simulate the passage of time, let's say we actually ran this, and wait till its scroll catches up. There we go. So I'm at the bottom of this CSV file. Let's say these articles from 2019 and this one were not in the ERIC database yet. So let's remove those. And then let's say this one didn't have an update yet, so it's going to be blank. It was just in there once, but that update hadn't happened yet. So if I save that and close that, now I'm going to simulate coming back. So let's say it's 6 months later. This has been a long webinar. And we're going to read in that CSV file. And you can see here I've now got 187 rows, whereas initially when I ran this, I had 191. So that accounts for the 4 that we deleted. And this code, and then I'm going to rerun my query to get the latest. So now I've got from my database, which was my comma-separated values file, and the query, I've got what was there 6 months ago and what's there now. And this is just a little bit here of code that will calculate the difference between those two. Many different ways to do that in different programming languages. But you can see here, these now are the 5 files that have been changed since then. And if we want to see the ones that were modified and weren't new, then this is another query to show that. So it shows that one of the 5 wasn't brand new, it was actually modified. And so there's a lot more you could do with the metadata there. Just a very simple example to illustrate the use case of being able to keep track of ERIC changes in ERIC over time. And just a couple other examples I had here just to show capabilities. So we could, you could easily sort records. So in this case, I'm doing that query that we had before, and sorting for author and title. There we go. And so this is looking at the first 20 records sorted by author and then sorted by title that are available. If I wanted to find the top sources for that same query, I could do that. So looking at the sources, 103 of those sources were for this particular source here. That's kind of interesting. Again, being able to characterize the data. And if I wanted to go and see what the count was for different types of searches, there's an example that's searching autism, again, becoming more specific as we go down. Things like education, which is the count for most of the database, and showing you what the various counts are for different types of queries. Okay. So I hope that the demonstration has shown you that you can really use the ERIC API for a variety of purposes. You can also export your results and your API searches into different formats to support different ways of working, different needs that you have. And I hope it's given you a good idea of how the ERIC API might be able to help you.
Well, thank you, Doug. We hope this presentation was really helpful and that you're going to give our API a try. So right now we're going to take some Q&A. And the first question we have is, will I get the same search results through the API that I get through the ERIC search? So the answer to this is no. So they search the same database in the same fields, and the same information is made available. However, there are things that are done on the front end of the ERIC website, or if you're searching through subscription databases, there's ways that the search engine works on the front end that will have you get slightly different search results. So they might be in a different order. Generally, they might be off by a couple records, but it's just because the front end of the search engine works slightly different, but the database is all the same. Okay. The second question is, will the documentation in the Juniper Notebook be made available to all API users? And the answer is yes. So when we archive this webinar, we're going to be putting the link on the multimedia page, and we're going to be emailing everybody who registered this link. It'll probably be about 3 weeks from now, but it'll be made available on the ERIC website. Okay, so the second question is, how frequently is the ERIC database uploaded? So, or third question, so we update the database normally within every 6 weeks. Sometimes it's sooner, sometimes it can go a little bit longer. So what you would do is, the important aspect of the API is that as soon as the records go live on the ERIC site, they're going to be made available in the API. So it's not like how we have currently with the download file that you have to wait for us to release a new file, which is normally every 6 months. And then you have to know when that is, download it, and then ingest into your system. This is made immediately available. You'll get it the same time you would find it on our website. Okay. So the question is, are there any restrictions or barriers to doing something like an automated web scrape on the ERIC page found in an API search to get the direct link to record and download and maybe cache it? The full text or a thumbnail for display on another web page, ownership, copyright issues, for some folks, that potential server strain, etc., are all ERIC resources in the public domain or only the metadata. Okay, so I'm going to take a stab, and I'm probably going to defer to experts in the room to make sure that what I'm saying is correct. Our metadata is in the public domain. So everything that we make available through the API is in a public domain. The full text, ERIC does not have copyright. We actually have a video on our multimedia page, and then I think we just tweeted out yesterday, that talks about how copyright. So you can't, our copyright permissions say that you should not do that. That would be a violation of copyright. We also maximize the number of records that you can download at any time as 200 to prevent server strain. Anything else?
You covered that well.
Okay. So, perfect. Will this presentation be available to view again somewhere? Yes, it will be made available through YouTube, and the link will be embedded on the ERIC multimedia page. Do we have instructions on how to use the API with LibGuide? The link to instructions. So we're going to be making this, the Juniper Notebooks, made available. And if you have other ideas and suggestions of how we could do this, let us know. We're certainly open to tools that you might needs.
Yeah, I definitely encourage people to ask specific questions after they've gone to the LibGuides documentation and it's not clear to how to tie into the REST API, to let us know.
There's one. How do I get access to the ERIC API? So if you go to ERIC, well, the URL is up there. But if you go to eric.ed.gov, it's in the footer. And it says the API, you click on it, and get the page that we demoed. Okay. This is a dead question. If you have a working question of a query search language like SQL, can you effectively use this?
Yeah, I think you can. The searches that we're doing with the AND that we showed before and searching the criteria, I think that should be fairly straightforward. You'll need some way to make that REST API call. So there are frameworks available that will do that for you. A lot of times you're integrating the REST API, the ERIC REST API, into an existing application. And so you really want to start with that existing application, whether that's a custom application you've developed. It may be something like LibGuides, which has the capability of calling other REST APIs. But generally, it follows a SQL-like structure. And I would encourage you to really just to go to the documentation link that we have up here now, and you can hit the Try It button, and you can try various queries with the examples that are in the documentation, and it should feel fairly comfortable.
All right, so I tried to upload a report to ERIC, but you can't access the full text. When will users be able to download the full text? Okay, so this is unrelated to the API. So if you, we are also taking other questions, but for those, just putting qualification. So through our online submission, we typically make a record within 30 days, and then we make it available on the ERIC website within 6 weeks of that point. So I normally tell people to assume 3 months and be pleasantly surprised when it's sooner. Other questions? Okay, I'm going to just give it one more minute if anyone has any burning questions. Okay, we can see something coming in. I'm very interested in using Juniper Notebook for bibliometric analysis. Do I need to learn Python, or have you created a notebook with API and is it posted somewhere? Good day.
So yeah, Jupyter Notebook could be a great tool for that. As we mentioned, we are going to be making this Jupyter Notebook available to you with the recording of the webinar. So that's a good starting place. It is using the Python language, and within Python, it's using a framework called Pandas, which is the most popular Python library for doing data analysis, which is exactly similar to what you're talking about here. But it will require some digging in to learn a little bit of Python and some of the Pandas capabilities. There's a tremendous number of free resources out there on the internet to get you going with that, and lots of folks interested in helping out. So I hope that helps answer that question.
Okay, great. All right, do we have anything else? Okay, so I have an ask for you, that if you use the ERIC API, we would love to hear how you were using it to get examples of use cases and any feedback you have. If there's big things or small things, wish lists, please let us know. And to do that by emailing ericrequests@ed.gov. And that would be really useful for us, as well as if you have any ideas of how to enhance ERIC. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out or send us an email at ericrequests@ed.gov. Thank you.